Good morning. I'm John Ellsworth, founder of Success Strategies Incorporated and the creator of the Success Strategies Advantage, and I want to welcome you to today's presentation, which I have entitled, Remember the Scary Times? Well, the interesting title that I put on this came from recently rereading a book by business coach Dan Sullivan, who is the co-founder of the Strategic Coach in Chicago and Ontario, Canada. I want to thank him for his thoughts, but the book was entitled Scary Times Success Manual. The original manuscript, and all that I'm going to talk about today, came from Dan, and I want to give him full credit for this thinking, his points. The original manuscript came from shortly after 9/11 when Dan was in New York City doing a presentation, getting ready for a presentation, I believe. And he said, and I quote, "As I was preparing for a special client event in New York City, I thought, when something like this is happening," referring back to 9/11, of course, you have to forget about some things and focus intently on other things. I started writing and came up with a list of 10 forget about this and 10 focus on that strategies, which turned into a 4-page document that I call the Scary Times Success Manual. End of quote. Now, these points, I wanted to share these points because, you know what, we're going through some scary times. We always have some scary times, don't we? Especially if you're an entrepreneur running your own business. Right now, we're still fighting off inflation and the rising costs of things in our businesses and in our personal lives as well. Interest rates, which hopefully soon will be coming down, but right now they're still elevated by the Fed. And then we have falling commodity prices. So if you're marketing commodities or anything that could be categorized as a commodity, that can put some price squeeze on you, some margin squeeze on you. So as Dan points out, and again, I quote Dan on all of these are his thoughts. I want to talk about the things that he said, what you should forget about, and rather what you should focus on, and then give you a little bit of maybe an example for each one, not from Dan necessarily, but from my own client work. So, number one, he said, forget about yourself and focus on others. Forget about yourself, focus on others. And I got to thinking of an example of this post 9/11 or some other event, traumatic event. How about your employees? What are they dealing with? Can you relate to them? Can you comfort them, so to speak, assure them that their job's going to be there? Or at least do the best you can with that process. Number two, Dan says, forget about the commodity. Forget about your commodity. Focus on your relationships. And I got to thinking, when you're talking about forgetting about commodities and focusing on relationships, the thought that came to mind for me was get in touch with your banker, get in touch with your vendors, because frankly, you're going to need them long term. So when you're focusing on relationships, think about your banker and your vendors and how you're going to need them long term. So communicate with them. Number three, Dan says, forget about the sale and focus on creating value. Well, this is a good policy for good times and bad. Always be thinking, how can I increase the value that I'm offering to my customers, to my employees, or any other number of people. Number four, Dan says, forget about your losses, focus on your opportunities. You take an event like 9/11 or COVID that we went through a few years ago, they both created some calamity, but they also created some opportunities that we could capture by focusing, as Dan suggests, focus on what's working. Not ignore what's not working, try and fix that, but more importantly, focus on what is working. Number five, forget about your difficulties and focus on your progress. What kind of progress are you making? Let's shoot for better outcomes. Number six, forget about your future, focus on today. What can I do in the next 24 hours is what came to mind for me. What can I do in the next day, 2 days, but particularly the next 24 hours, and deal with that one day at a time. Forget about who you were and start focusing on who you can be. And I think that's a very positive approach that Dan provides us. And in other words, he's saying set bigger goals. And I know if you watch these videos of mine, you've heard that numerous times. So set bigger goals. Focus on who you can be. Number 8, forget about the events. Let's focus on your responses. And 9/11, COVID, whatever calamity you've gone through, and we've all had some challenges, of course, either through these events or other events. Don't focus on the event. Focus on your response to that, because you can't control the event. The ones I mentioned, you and I have no control over them happening, but we do have a control over how we respond to them. Point number 9, Dan suggests you should forget about what's missing and focus on what's available. What has changed? What items do I need to clean up in my business or in my personal life? What can I do to get better? And finally, number 6, Dan suggests you should forget about your complaints and focus on your gratitude. In other words, be grateful, be positive, and remember, as I've suggested before, they still, to my knowledge, have not erected any statues for a pessimist. So it's good to be grateful, be positive, and focus on your gratitude. I hope you've enjoyed Dan's 10 points. I think they're immensely helpful. Some will be more in tune with what you're thinking than others. But as Dan Miller said, and I quote, "Don't wait on the perfect conditions for success to happen. Just go ahead and do something." End of quote. Again, I'm John Ellsworth, founder of Success Strategies Incorporated and the creator of the Success Strategies Advantage, and I want to thank you for listening today. Thank you very much.